So I want you to picture this. You're a valet at like a really high-end hotel in Los Angeles.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. And a tech multimillionaire pulls up. But he doesn't just hand you the keys to his car. He actually hands you this massive, thick stack of cash.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, thousands of dollars in crisp $100 bills. And he tells you to run to the nearest jewelry store to buy fistfuls of solid gold coins.
I mean, that sounds like the setup to a heist movie. Or maybe some kind of weird prank.
Exactly. But you do it right. You bring the gold coins back. Then the multimillionaire takes them, walks straight down to the Pacific Ocean with his friends, and they literally start skipping them across the water.
Wait, what? Like rocks?
Like flat rocks, just chucking them into the waves, $1,000 a pop, splashing into the ocean just for laughs.
That is insane. And the punchline to that completely true story is that years later, that same tech multimillionaire went entirely bankrupt. He lost absolutely everything.
Totally wiped out. And honestly, that story perfectly captures our mission for today's deep dive because, we're taught from a very young age to think about money like it's a hard science.
Right, like physics or chemistry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We think it's all just math and formulas and spreadsheets. But the reality is that money is a soft skill.
Yeah.
It's driven by psychology, ego, emotion, and sometimes this completely irrational desire to just skip gold into the sea.
Which is wild. And for this deep dive, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources. We've got book excerpts, author interviews, financial analyses, and they're all centered around the concepts in Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money.
Such a good collection of ideas.
It really is. And the core argument across all these materials is that financial success actually has very little to do with how smart you are. It has almost everything to do with how you behave.
Right.
It's basically this exploration of the invisible psychological forces that completely dictate our financial lives.
And whether you are just trying to optimize your retirement savings, or maybe you're trying to keep your head cool during a stock market crash.
Which is hard.
Super hard.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you're just trying to figure out why people do weird things with their paychecks. Understanding these forces is going to completely reframe how you view financial success.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think we have to start by entirely dismantling the idea that humans make purely rational financial decisions.
Yeah, we really do.
The sources introduce this foundational, almost comforting concept, which is just that no one is crazy.
And that is really the baseline for everything that follows in this deep dive. I mean, to understand why someone throws gold into the ocean or why someone stuffs cash under their mattress during a raging bull market, we have to recognize something important.
Which is what?
That what looks like reckless insanity to us, it feels totally justified to them in that specific moment.
See, I struggle with that no one is crazy premise, though.
Why is that?
Because when you see someone take massive leverage, like they borrowed to the absolute hilt to buy some speculative crypto coin, and they lose their entire life savings.
Yeah, that's brutal.
That looks pretty crazy to me. How do the sources justify that kind of behavior as anything other than just madness?
But what's fascinating here is that it comes down to the wildly disparate lenses through which we all view the world.
Okay.
The sources highlight this incredible statistic to explain that behavior. They point out that your personal experiences with money make up maybe 0.0000001% of what has happened in the world.
So literally almost nothing.
Right. But those tiny experiences dictate 80% of how you think the world works.
Oh, wow.
So if someone takes massive leverage and blows up their account, they might have spent their formative years in an environment where the only people who ever got ahead were the ones who took massive, reckless gambles.
Right, so their lived experience taught them a totally different lesson than yours taught you. So we are essentially all walking around wearing incredibly distorted glasses. Like, a child raised in poverty has an internal risk gauge that is fundamentally different from a child raised by a wealthy investment banker.
Yeah, and think about timing, too. If you entered the job market during the late 90s tech boom, your physiological response to the stock market is going to be entirely different from someone who lost everything in the Great Depression.
Oh, for sure.
The person who lived through the Depression has a brain completely wired for financial scarcity. They learned things firsthand about ruin that you just simply cannot fully grasp from reading a history book.
Right, because everyone is playing a game that makes perfect sense to their specific, localized worldview.
Exactly.
Which means we are all operating with massive blind spots. And I think that brings up two forces the sources focus really heavily on, which are luck and risk.
Yeah, and they actually describe them as siblings.
Which is an interesting way to put it. Why siblings?
Well, they're siblings because they both represent the exact same reality, which is that the world is just far too complex for 100% of your actions to dictate 100% of your outcomes.
That makes sense.
You're just one person in this massive economic game with billions of other moving parts. So sometimes the accidental impact of things totally outside your control dictates your outcome.
The Bill Gates story from the materials illustrates this perfectly, I think.
Oh, I love that example.
Right, because we celebrate Gates as this visionary, bold genius.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he obviously is.
Sure.
But he also happened to attend one of the only high schools in the entire world that actually had a computer in 1968. It's just immense luck.
It really is. And then on the flip side, the sources point out that he had a friend, this guy named Kent Evans.
Right, Kent.
And Kent was just as skilled, just as driven, and he shared that exact same access to the computer.
But he didn't end up founding Microsoft.
No, because Kent died in a tragic mountaineering accident before graduation. Same bold traits, totally different side of the roulette wheel.
That is just so sad. But it's the essence of risk, right?
Right.
We tend to put the successful tech billionaire on the cover of Forbes, and we analyze their morning routines and their decision-making.
Oh, constantly.
But we completely ignore the equally bold entrepreneur who made the exact same decisions but just got wiped out by a random tail risk.
Yeah.
Wait, let's define that for a second, actually, because tail risk gets thrown around a lot in these financial sources.
Good call. So a tail risk basically refers to an event that sits at the very extreme end of a bell curve.
Okay.
It's an outcome that is highly unlikely to happen. That's the tail of the probability distribution. But if it does happen, the impact is catastrophic.
So Ken Evans' accident is a tragic, extreme tail risk.
Exactly. In finance, a tail risk might be a global pandemic suddenly shutting down the economy, or like a localized natural disaster destroying a company's headquarters.
Right. And we are so quick to attribute financial success entirely to hard work and failure entirely to bad decisions.
We really are.
But if we don't respect the silent, immense roles of luck and risk, we just end up trying to emulate strategies that were actually just lucky coin flips.
Yeah, that's exactly the danger.
So if we can't perfectly control luck and we can't completely avoid risk, we have to look for the levers we actually can pull.
Right.
And this kind of shifts the conversation from those unpredictable external forces to the internal mechanisms we actually have our hands on, namely time and expectations.
Yes. And this brings us to what might be the most mind-bending mathematical reality in all of finance, which is the confounding nature of compounding.
Oh man, compounding.
Let me throw a number at you. Warren Buffett is obviously famous for his wealth, right? If we look at his net worth at a snapshot of around $84.5 billion, the shocking part isn't actually the total number, it's the timeline.
How do you mean?
Of that 84.5 billion, 81.5 billion came after his 65th birthday.
That is just staggering. Over 96% of his wealth was accumulated when most people are already retired. And everyone spends thousands of hours studying Buffett's investment strategies, reading his annual letters, trying to find his secret sauce for picking stocks.
But his real secret isn't necessarily having the absolute highest returns year over year. I mean, there are plenty of hedge fund managers who have vastly outperformed Buffett's average annual return.
But they didn't do it for 75 years.
Bingo. His secret is simply uninterrupted time. The math of compounding just goes absolutely wild at the extreme late stages of a timeline.
And our brains completely fail to grasp this concept.
We really struggle with it.
The sources provide this brilliant mathematical analogy here. If I ask you what 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, you know, a bunch of times.
You intuitively know it's 72.
Right. You can estimate that linearly in your head.
Right.
But if I swap the plus signs for multiplication, if I ask you what 8 times 8 times 8 times 8 is, your brain completely melts. It's over 134 million.
And that's because human beings are biologically wired for linear thinking, not exponential thinking.
Right.
Evolutionary psychology tells us that our ancestors didn't need to calculate the 40-year exponential growth of a berry bush.
No, they needed to know how many berries were in front of them right now just to survive the winter.
Exactly. And because we can't contextualize exponential late-stage growth intuitively, we just ignore it.
Yeah.
We try to solve our financial problems by seeking out the absolute highest returns immediately.
which usually involves taking on massive, unsustainable risks.
Spot on. We interrupt the compounding process because we're just so impatient.
But the materials point out that the root cause of that impatience is actually an inability to define the word enough.
Yes. Enough is such a crucial concept here.
They bring up figures like Rajat Gupta and Bernie Madoff. I mean, these were men who already possessed hundreds of millions of dollars.
They had absolute financial freedom.
Totally. Yet they risked everything they had and literally ended up in prison for money they didn't have and didn't even need.
Because they fell into the trap of the moving goalpost. I mean, capitalism is an incredible engine for two things: generating massive wealth and generating intense envy.
Oh, envy is huge.
It is. If your expectations rise equally with your results, there is no logic in striving for more, because you will always feel the exact same level of satisfaction.
You take one step forward, but your baseline for happiness just moves 2 steps away.
Exactly. Social comparison is a game with absolutely no ceiling. If you compare yourself to a millionaire, the millionaire compares themselves to a billionaire.
And the billionaire compares themselves to like an entire sovereign nation.
Exactly. The only way to win the game of keeping up with the Joneses is to literally refuse to play.
Wow. So enough isn't about leaving opportunity on the table then.
Yeah.
And it certainly isn't about lacking ambition.
No, not at all. Enough is just the profound realization that an insatiable appetite will eventually push you to the point of absolute regret.
Right.
It's knowing that throwing your hard-earned gold coins into the ocean just to signal your status to your fins is a losing game.
But realizing you have enough requires battling what might be the strongest human impulse of all, which is ego.
Oh, ego is the enemy of wealth.
Which is why leaving money alone to compound is so brutally difficult. We have to examine this psychological battle between ego and spending.
And to do that, we need to really clearly distinguish between being rich and being wealthy.
Because society uses those words interchangeably, but they are fundamentally different states of being.
They really are.
The sources highlight this with what they call the man-in-the-car paradox. And this goes back to my valet days.
Oh, let's hear it.
When a guy pulls up to the curb in a $300,000 Ferrari, the driver assumes everyone on the street is just staring at him, admiring his success.
Yeah, he bought the car to signal his importance.
Exactly. But the paradox is that the onlookers aren't really admiring the driver at all.
No, they are looking at the car, imagining themselves in the driver's seat.
It's so true. You buy the expensive car because you want wealth to signal to others that you should be admired, but it completely backfires.
It really does.
People just use your wealth as a benchmark for their own desire to be admired.
And this dynamic explains why we have such a skewed perception of financial success. Because richness is a current income. It is highly visible.
Right. The guy in the Ferrari is rich because he has the income to make the lease payments.
Yeah, you can spot a rich person easily because they go out of their way to be seen. But wealth is entirely invisible.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Wealth is the Ferrari not purchased.
Yes.
It's the first-class upgrade you completely declined. It's the diamond you left at the store. The sources bring up Rihanna, actually.
Oh, the Rihanna story is fascinating.
Right. She almost went bankrupt early in her career from massive overspending, and she actually ended up suing her financial advisor over it.
And do you remember what the advisor's defense in court was?
It was amazing. He basically said, did I really need to tell you that if you spend your money on things, you end up with the things and not the money?
It sounds like a joke, but it highlights a profound psychological blind spot we all share.
Because when people say, I want to be a millionaire, what they almost always actually mean is, I want to spend $1 million.
Which is literally the exact opposite of being a millionaire.
Exactly. If you spend it, you no longer have it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the ultimate irony of money. Your savings rate isn't primarily determined by how much you earn.
What is it determined by then?
It is determined by the gap between your ego and your income. As long as your ego requires you to display your money to the world, you will never accumulate actual wealth.
Because the emotional toll of saving is just so high. It requires immense self-regulation to ignore all those status games happening all around you.
Exactly. But wealth is simply the unspent assets that give you options, flexibility, and autonomy.
Autonomy really is the ultimate goal. I mean, the highest dividend money pays isn't a 10% market return.
No.
It's waking up in the morning and being able to say, I can do whatever I want today with whoever I want for as long as I want.
And to accumulate that kind of invisible wealth, you have to actually stay in the game long enough for compounding to do its heavy lifting.
Which brings us to a really crucial divide from the materials. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy.
They are completely different skill sets.
Right. Because getting wealthy requires optimism, taking risks, and putting yourself out there.
But staying wealthy requires the exact opposite mindset. It requires frugality, humility, and a really healthy dose of paranoia.
Because survival is the name of the game.
Hmm.
And the sources point out a really tough truth here, which is that nothing is free.
No, everything has a price. The price tag just isn't always visible on the shelf.
What's an example of that?
Well, think about buying a car. You want a $30,000 car. You have three options, basically. You can pay the $30,000, you can buy a cheaper used car, or you can steal the new car.
Okay, I think I know where this is going.
Right. Now, 99% of people know stealing the car is a terrible idea because of the consequences of grand theft auto far outweigh the benefit of the vehicle.
Yeah, I am definitely not risking a decade in prison for a Honda Civic.
Exactly. You intuitively understand the invisible price of the crime. But when it comes to investing, people try to steal the car all the time.
How do you mean?
They want the historical 10% annual market return, but they refuse to pay the admission price.
Oh,
The fee for long-term market returns isn't dollars and cents. It's volatility, fear, uncertainty, and the gut-wrenching experience of watching your portfolio drop 30% during a recession.
right. And instead of accepting that emotional fee, investors try to outsmart the system,
Yeah, they day trade, they use leverage, they try to perfectly time the market.
all to get the reward without enduring any of the pain. They're basically trying to commit financial grand theft auto.
That's a great way to put it. And just like real car thieves, they usually end up getting caught. The market humbles them and wipes them out.
Which is why the sources argue so strongly for an approach that prioritizes being reasonable over being coldly rational.
Yeah.
Okay, this is where I want to dive into some traditional financial advice. Because the sources mention this incredible study from Yale.
Oh, the leverage study.
Yes. These Yale researchers mathematically proved that young investors should use 100% leverage in their retirement accounts.
Which means they should borrow as much money as possible to invest in the stock market.
Right. Because the math shows that over a 40-year timeline, even if the market completely crashes and their leveraged accounts go to absolute zero,
Yeah.
they still have enough time to borrow again, bounce back, and mathematically end up wealthier than if they hadn't used leverage at all.
I mean, on a chalkboard, that math is flawless. It perfectly maximizes expected returns.
On a spreadsheet, it's brilliant. But human beings are not chalkboards.
No, we're really not.
Who can actually stomach that? If you watch your entire life savings vaporize because you were fully leveraged, you aren't going to calmly borrow more money the next day and start over.
Not a chance.
You are going to panic, sell everything at the absolute bottom, and probably swear off investing for the rest of your life.
And that perfectly illustrates the distinction between rational and reasonable. The Yale study is totally rational.
But it completely ignores human psychology.
Exactly. It is not reasonable. The author of the book actually points out that he paid off his home mortgage entirely, even though interest rates were at rock bottom.
Right, which every financial advisor and spreadsheet would tell him is a terrible move. They'd say keep the cheap mortgage and invest his cash in the stock market to earn a higher yield.
Mathematically, a terrible decision. Terribly rational, yes, but entirely reasonable.
Why reasonable?
Because owning his home outright provided a level of psychological peace of mind that a spreadsheet just cannot calculate. It guaranteed that no matter what happened in the economy, no matter how bad a recession got, his family would never be homeless.
And that foundational security gave him the emotional stability to stay invested in the stock market during chaotic times without panicking.
Exactly. It created a margin of safety, room for error.
And having a massive margin of safety isn't about lacking ambition or being overly cautious, right?
Right.
It's about acknowledging this really fascinating psychological phenomenon called the end of history illusion.
Oh, I loved this concept from the sources.
It's so good. It's basically the idea that we sit here today, right now, and firmly believe we are the final, finished versions of ourselves.
Right. We think the goals we have today are the exact goals we will have forever.
But we constantly underestimate how much we will change. I mean, the person you were at 20 wants vastly different things than the person you are at 40.
Or the person you will be at 60. You don't just have one 80-year financial plan. You essentially live 4 20-year lives.
That's a great way to think about it. And if you lock yourself into an extreme financial strategy like grinding 80 hours a week at a job you hate just to buy a mansion,
Or living on rice and beans just to retire at 30.
Right. You leave absolutely no room for the fact that your desires will evolve. You might burn out, you might have a family, or you might realize you actually hate being retired at 30.
Exactly. Survival means keeping enough flexibility and unspent cash, that invisible wealth we talked about, so that when you inevitably evolve, your finances can pivot with you without completely blowing up your life.
Because good investing isn't about making the single best, genius decision.
No, it's about consistently not screwing up. It's avoiding the catastrophic wipeouts so that compounding can actually work its magic over time.
Wow. Okay, bringing this all together, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today.
You really have.
We've explored how money is not just a hard store of value, but this highly volatile conduit of emotion, ego, and deeply personal lived experience.
Yeah.
We've seen how respecting the silent forces of luck and risk can make us far more forgiving of our own failures, and honestly, significantly less arrogant about our successes.
Which is a healthy mindset to have.
Definitely. And we unpacked the truly mind-melting mathematical magic of compounding time. Plus, realizing that true wealth is actually the invisible stuff. It's the cars you didn't buy.
The things you left on the table.
Exactly. By managing your ego, leaving a massive room for error, and prioritizing long-term survival over maximizing short-term returns, you can align your money with its ultimate utility.
Which is absolute freedom over your own time.
Exactly. So as you evaluate your own financial roadmap, I really encourage you to look at your choices and ask yourself a crucial question.
And that is, am I playing my own game or am I accidentally playing someone else's?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Because when a long-term investor takes financial cues from, like, a day trader on television.
Or when you try to match the visible spending habits of a neighbor who has entirely different life goals than you.
You are just inviting disaster. You really need to identify your specific game, understand your own psychological weak points, and just stick to your plan.
I love that. And to wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, really provocative thought from our sources to just mull over on your own.
Okay, what is it?
They noted that ultimately the most powerful force in the entire global economy isn't tangible goods. It's not housing data or interest rates.
No. What is it?
It's the stories we tell ourselves.
Oh, wow.
Imagine an alien viewing Times Square on New Year's Eve in 2007, right before the global financial crash.
Okay.
Bright lights, huge crowds, massive visible wealth everywhere. Now imagine that exact same alien viewing Times Square in 2009, right in the absolute depths of the Great Recession.
It would probably look pretty much the same.
Exactly. The physical world looked exactly the same. The buildings were still there. The people were still there. The technology was all the same.
Right.
But the invisible stories inside our heads, the panic, the sudden loss of trust, all those shifting narratives, that is what caused a massive, devastating global meltdown.
That's incredible to think about.
Think back to that millionaire skipping gold coins into the Pacific Ocean. He did that because his internal story told him he was totally invincible. The physical gold didn't change at all. His story did.
Yeah.
So as you go about your week, ask yourself, what is the invisible financial story you are unconsciously telling yourself right now? And honestly, more importantly, is it even true?